8 billion tons of carbon into our atmosphere, 90 million tons of fish out of our oceans, 11 billion trees toppled on land. Another year has elapsed on planet Earth. From every corner of the globe, countries are heeding the environmental call. And we'll reveal which ones are working to keep Earth healthy and which ones are making it sicker. The 2007 numbers are in, and it's time once again to take our planet's pulse. Planet Earth. The winds of change are rippling across its surface. Taxicabs in New York are going hybrid. Light bulbs in Australia are going fluorescent. The whole of Vatican City is going carbon neutral. All around the globe, many of us are focused on changing our ways. Because last year, we accepted that the Earth itself is changing. And all 6.6 billion of us are the cause.
There's no species in all of preceding history that has the capacity to alter the way the world works in such profound ways as humankind.
From the air, land, and sea, and through the creatures that live in and on them, we'll rewind through some of the biggest news events of the past year, taking the pulse of our planet all along the way. With the help of Yale and Columbia universities and their Environmental Performance Index, or EPI, we will rank the environmental prowess of 141 countries and reveal which ones are helping to heal the planet and which ones are adding to its ills. Yale's Dan Esty directs the project.
Our index looks at a core set of countries for which we can get data in a set of critical categories: air pollution, water pollution, greenhouse gas emissions. And then we try to add this up into an overall index.
If the 2006 EPI is anything to go by, New Zealand is the country to beat, followed by Sweden, Finland, the Czech Republic, and the United Kingdom. On the flip side, there are many on the list with much room for improvement, and some that are not exactly happy about it.
And we say to them, don't blame us. We understand that you're unhappy, but let's together look at what you can do better. And we've had countries from the United Arab Emirates to Mexico to Korea come to us and say, help us move forward. And frankly, that's what we've been most pleased about.
Assessing the Earth's health isn't quite as simple as taking its temperature. And with varying climates, populations, and economic circumstances, ecological issues don't always divide along national borders. But by culling and carefully comparing the best data from organizations like the United Nations, the Nature Conservancy, and the world's top research centers and universities, the EPI team believes they're establishing a meaningful baseline.
We're a complicated animal, this planet. We've got lots of different pulses, but I'd also tell you that we're confident that we are presenting the cleanest, clearest, best picture of the state of the planet that is available today.
Beginning with that blanket of nitrogen, oxygen, and other gases stretching 560 kilometers above our heads, our atmosphere. It's those gases, not our oceans, that give Earth its blue hue from space. And over the past 250 years, the levels of greenhouse gases, like carbon dioxide and methane, have grown greater than any time in the previous 650,000 years. Mike Fay is a conservationist and National Geographic explorer in residence.
Carbon accumulated for well over something like 200 million years on this planet. And in the last kind of 60, 80 years, we have burned probably 100 million years worth of accumulated carbon.
For decades, scientists and politicians have argued over the exact causes and implications of this increase. But on February 2nd, 2007, the fighting stopped. After 6 years reviewing all available research, hundreds of climate experts from more than 100 countries, including the United States, issued a report through the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change that confirms the Earth's air and sea temperatures are climbing, and that the burning of fossil fuels and other human activities like deforestation are driving the change.
Having to admit that that is true is a milestone. There's no doubt about that. They can no longer deny it. And so now what we need to do is go from recognition of the problem to action.
Carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases are vital components of our atmosphere, trapping enough solar heat to make life possible. But as we pump more and more of these gases into the air, we trap more heat, and the world gets warmer. Already, we've warmed up the Earth by about 1.4 degrees Fahrenheit. And if we continue emitting CO2 into the atmosphere at the same rate, that's likely to climb some 4 to 7 degrees higher by the beginning of the next century. With developing countries like India and China growing at rapid rates, putting the brakes on carbon emissions is more challenging than ever. The average American may churn out 5 times more CO2 than the average Chinese. But last year marked a major turning point. China surpassed the United States in total carbon emissions.
I like to teach the students at Yale that there's good news and there's bad news around China. The good news is if we get China on the right environmental trajectory, almost nothing else matters. But likewise, if we don't get China on the right track, almost nothing else matters.
With its 1.3 billion people and a surging economy, China is now the workhorse of the world, exporting inexpensive goods to wealthy countries abroad and importing much of their carbon footprints. The greater the demand for products, the more energy the country needs to keep up. As a result, China opens 1 new coal-burning power plant every single week, each with the annual greenhouse gas emissions of about 2 million cars. Over the next 10 years, as an estimated 400 million people move from farmland to cities, many will grow wealthier and drive more cars. China's own footprint will only continue to grow.
יש יותר מדי מטוסים באוויר. מרכז הפיקוח האווירי שורד בקושי. חיים נמצאים בסכנה. ועם מערכת תקולה, יש צורך בצעדים דרסטיים לפני שיקרה האסון הבא. תעופה בחקירה, הערב ב8. נסו לדמיין, נסיעה ברכבת הרים בפעם הראשונה בחיים. ערוץ נשיונל ג'אוגרפיק הופך את המחקר על ראשו. כש5 גברים עוזבים את מולדתם באיי ונואטו כדי לגלות את אמריקה. שם הם משחקים גולף, רואים שלג ואפילו מנסים את מזלם בבורסה. פגוש את הילידים, אמריקה, הערב ב9. לפי שבט המאיה, העולם כפי שאנחנו מכירים אותו יגיע לקיצור ב-21 בדצמבר 2012. האם צדקו בני המאיה? ערוץ נשיונל ג'אוגרפיק בוחן את האמת מאחורי האגדה, שעומדת כעת גם במרכזו של שובר הקופות ההוליוודי 2012. האם יש לנו ממה לחשוש? 2012, קץ העולם, ראשון ב9. זה התחיל כמשימה של האו"ם, שמירה על השקט, אבל הפך במהרה לצד מכשפות.
The rebels are going on the rampage. They're out on the warpath.
בלי נשק, בלי אספקה ובסכנת חיים.
He's gonna eat you if he gets you.
האם יישארו להילחם או יעשו ניסיון נואש לזכות בחופש?
I was gonna have to silence an innocent kid in order to escape.
כלואים בארץ זרה, ילדים חיילים, שני ב9. כמו הרבה חיות שהם מצילים, חברי כוח ההצלה הזה יודעים מה זה לקבל הזדמנות שנייה.
We're not the typical rescue organization.
8 גברים קשוחים, חמושים בשרירים מפותחים וקעקועים לרוב, במשימת הצלה של בעלי חיים מוזנחים שעברו התעללות.
You pick on the animals because they don't fight back.
You don't shoot cats.
עבור הבחורים האלה מדובר בעניין אישי.
I'm doing it from my heart.
חיות על הרלי, שני ב10. 1943. מלחמת העולם השנייה עדיין לא הוכרעה. שיירות של בעלות הברית חייבות לשרוד כדי להעביר אספקה בפלישה הגדולה, ה-D-Day.
It would be impossible to avoid German U-boats. They would be everywhere.
שיירות על המים, מכת מוות, 4 ב9.
As we tally the greenhouse gas emissions from the Environmental Performance Index, China's higher carbon levels moves them down the list. But when we divide total emissions by the number of people in the country, we get a different picture.
So this is who is got an economy that's just very carbon intensive and whose economies are less carbon intensive.
From worse to worst, some top offenders in emissions per capita are Russia, Saudi Arabia, Canada, and the United States, with Kuwait, Australia, and the United Arab Emirates in the bottom 5. Dividing total emissions by a country's level of wealth, we see that Iceland, Costa Rica, Sweden, and Switzerland are curbing greenhouse gases, with Hong Kong earning the #1 spot.
What the important trend line for this year is that some countries who historically have had quite low emissions per person, China most notably, are suddenly deteriorating very rapidly. India is following the same trajectory. This is very worrisome.
In all, humans cumulatively released some 8 billion tons of carbon into the atmosphere last year, raising its levels of CO2 to 383 parts per million, a 37% increase over pre-industrial levels.
We're adding carbon now to the atmosphere at a rate which is unprecedented within recent geological history, at such a rate that it overwhelms the natural capacity of the Earth system to absorb it.
Mark Linus is a journalist and National Geographic grantee who has written extensively about the effects of carbon in the atmosphere.
Such an interesting experiment to scientists because it's really pushing the Earth's temperatures and the Earth's climate out of kilter beyond any kind of natural variations that we've seen in the past before.
Already, many scientists believe the frequency of severe weather around the world is changing because of current levels of CO2 emissions. Warmer air holds more water vapor and increases evaporation, which means more rain in areas that have a lot of water and less in areas without it. The Murray-Darling Basin in southern Australia has been scorched by drought since 2001. The basin, which covers an area as large as France and Spain combined, constitutes 3/4 of the country's irrigated land. And last year, most of its water stores dropped to critical levels. Water restrictions, withering crops, and food shortages could soon cost Australia billions. And last year, severe droughts affected every continent except Antarctica. And so did associated wildfires.
To create the perfect conditions for a really severe firestorm, you need to have very high temperatures, you need to have strong winds, and you need to have very dry conditions. Now, these are conditions which have been occurring more and more across the globe's surface.
In Greece, high temperatures and lack of rain created tinderbox conditions that allowed wildfires to char an estimated 5% of the country and kill dozens. The blazes, visible from space, nearly destroyed the site of the first Olympic Games, and officials say recovery could take decades. In the United States, fires burned through some 200,000 hectares of Southern California and forced more than 500,000 residents out of their homes. And in Paraguay, satellite images show some 400,000 hectares of land were scorched, the worst in the country's history. Spin the Earth to wetter climes, and we find increased temperatures and evaporation may have also affected the other extreme last year. In the United Kingdom, the River Severn washed over its banks, leaving hundreds stranded and tens of thousands without electricity or water for days.
I experienced it right here in Oxford, that the intensity of the rainfall was something which I've never experienced before. It was almost like a monsoon.
Halfway around the world, the August and September monsoons submerged 40% of Bangladesh, twice as much as in a typical year. The flooding displaced more than 9 million people, and nearly 200 lost their lives. Although we can't ascribe any single of these weather events to global warming, most scientists agree that droughts and floods will become more common as temperatures increase.
When you see more intense droughts and more intense floods in lots of different parts of the world, sometimes simultaneously in the same place, this gives a window into the future as climate impacts get more dramatic and begin to accelerate.
Not all that carbon dioxide rises into the atmosphere. Half of the CO2 we release into the air by burning fossil fuels, our oceans thankfully absorb. One problem, though, is that warmer water doesn't absorb gas nearly as well as cold water does. Which means as the Earth warms, more carbon dioxide is trapped in the atmosphere, and that could accelerate the warming of both the air and the sea. Sylvia Earle, a National Geographic explorer in residence, has been studying our oceans for the last 50 years.
The ocean governs climate, governs temperature. Without the ocean as the biggest sink for carbon dioxide, well, without the ocean, the planet wouldn't work, period.
Warmer oceans can cause problems on many levels, from mass fish die-offs to stronger hurricanes. But last year brought one other major risk factor to light. Warm water expands and causes sea levels to rise. The IPCC found that the oceans have been rising an average of 3.1 millimeters per year since 1993. At this rate, it warned, flooding could impact millions of people this century and wipe islands like the Maldives and Vanuatu off the map. Adding to the rise, our melting polar ice caps. Satellite images show temperatures have been rising faster here than anywhere else on the planet. And in the summer of 2007, the Arctic ice cap receded at a much higher rate than even the worst-case scenarios predicted, down to only 4.1 million square kilometers on September 16th.
And that took a lot of scientists by surprise. It's not a surprise to anyone that it's melting, but the rapidity of it melting and the extent to which so much of it disappeared has shocked a lot of people.
As a result of the record-setting ice melt, on August 21st, NASA satellites showed that the Northwest Passage, the long-sought Arctic shipping route, which has eluded explorers for centuries, was clear of ice.
And to think about that actually starting to melt and starting to open up, and for those ice shields to start to disappear in your lifetime is like, that for me is just insanity.
The news seemed to usher in a new age of discovery as countries staked competing claims around the Arctic. A Russian sub planted a flag below the North Pole. Denmark sent an expedition to prove the pole is rightfully owned by Greenland, a Danish province. And Canada announced it would control shipping lanes and open 2 new Arctic military bases. And since the route cuts the journey between Asia and Europe by a third, shipping companies see the potential to save time and fuel, while oil companies are poised to search for more reserves.
You'd think, oh wow, you know, this is going to be an opportunity for people to say, oof, this is bad news. That's where his humanity disappoints. You know, we think and we act immediately on those proximal things, but the important longer-term things, we ignore them.
With so many of the Earth's systems so intricately connected, and with so much of what we do affecting them, scientists say it's more important than ever that we understand how these systems work, for our own sakes, as well as the rest of the species on the planet, particularly when it comes to issues we can control, like carbon emissions.
The carbon dioxide that's in the atmosphere is largely taken up by the ocean. Life in the ocean, green things in the sea, grab carbon dioxide, generate oxygen. They also generate food.
But too much CO2 makes the oceans more acidic and more difficult for creatures, ranging from plankton to corals, to build shells and skeletons. Ultimately, it causes them to dissolve. If CO2 emissions continue at the current rate, over the next few hundred years, researchers have calculated the oceans will become more acidic than they have in the last 300 million. Oceans provide humans with their largest source of protein, with as many as 3.5 billion people depending on it for their primary source of food. Last year, many fish stocks continued their decades-long decline.
In the ocean, it's perfectly clear that we're taking too much, that we are extracting more than the populations can put back. We're seeing the consequences of not understanding that there are limits to what we can extract.
Whether through 100-kilometer-long fishing lines or bottom trawlers dragging heavily weighted nets across the seafloor, the damage to the environment is undeniable. Some 300,000 whales, dolphins, and porpoises died unnecessarily last year as unintended casualties of fishing nets. The damage from the trawlers is even worse.
Imagine catching squirrels with a bulldozer. That's what we're doing to the ocean, not in just a few places. Wherever trawling takes place, it is so intolerably destructive.
Each year, humans take about 90 million tons of fish out of the world's oceans. And this year, the United Nations predicted there would be a 40 million ton shortfall in global fish stocks by 2030, unless action is taken to slow overfishing and replenish stocks.
We aren't at the tipping point yet, but we can take actions now before things do get out of control. The next little piece of time is the best chance we'll ever have to get it right.
There are countries that are making great strides towards this end, which brings us to the next set of rankings in the Environmental Performance Index. Last year, Finland, South Africa, and Sweden all set or enforced limits to keep fishing off their waters sustainable, with Australia among the leaders.
Australia and New Zealand, they're big fishing countries by tradition, and they recognized a decade ago that if there are no fish, there's no fishermen, and there's no economy around fishing. They have reversed the trend. They have begun to see fish stocks rising.
At the other end of the scale, the EPI team found that Singapore, Belgium, and Germany have not been setting or enforcing fishing restrictions, with the Netherlands hitting rock bottom.
The irony here is that some of the countries that are the worst actors in this regard, Spain and several others in the European Union, are shocking. These are countries that should know better. And the fact that Spain continues to overfish and that the European Union does so little to discipline this bad behavior is an embarrassment.
The situation is nothing short of critical for our ocean's ecosystems, and scientists face enormous challenges getting people and policymakers to care about a world they can't see. But as we emerge from the oceans, we find the problems don't stop at the water's edge.
70% משטח כדור הארץ מכוסים במימיו של האוקיינוס. נסו לדמיין כיצד היה נראה כדור הארץ בלעדיו. לייבש את האוקיינוס. התוכנית הבאה. יש יותר מדי מטוסים באוויר. מרכז הפיקוח האווירי שורד בקושי. חיים נמצאים בסכנה. ועם מערכת תקולה, יש צורך בצעדים דרסטיים לפני שיקרה האסון הבא. תעופה בחקירה, הערב ב8. לפי שבט המאיה, העולם כפי שאנחנו מכירים אותו יגיע לקיצור ב-21 בדצמבר 2012. האם צדקו בני המאיה? ערוץ נשיונל ג'אוגרפיק בוחן את האמת מאחורי האגדה, שעומדת כעת גם במרכזו של שובר הקופות ההוליוודי 2012. האם יש לנו ממה לחשוש? 2012, קץ העולם, ראשון ב9.
The Earth is alive.
We want to know what's on our planet.
It's a living organism.
We can't help but be fascinated by it.
עוין, שביר, מלא עוצמה, כדור הארץ. ניסיון לפענח כמה מהתופעות המדעיות הגדולות של כל הזמנים, חקר סוד החיים וחשיפת תיאוריות מדהימות חדשות לגבי היקום. חקר כדור הארץ, ראשון ב11. כמו הרבה חיות שהם מצילים, חברי כוח ההצלה הזה יודעים מה זה לקבל הזדמנות שנייה.
We're not the typical rescue organization.
8 גברים קשוחים, חמושים בשרירים מפותחים וקעקועים לרוב, במשימת הצלה של בעלי חיים מוזנחים שעברו התעללות.
You pick on the animals because they don't fight back.
You don't shoot cats.
עבור הבחורים האלה מדובר בעניין אישי.
I'm doing it for my heart.
חיות על הרלי, שני ב10. ההיסטוריה שופעת רעיונות גדולים, חלוצים, חולמים. הסקרנים, בשבילם הבלתי אפשרי הוא פשוט אתגר. ההיסטוריה מלאה באנשים שסרבו לעמוד במקום והפכו רעיונות גדולים לעצומים. ערוץ נשיונל ג'אוגרפיק מתחכה אחר האבולוציה של כמה מיצירות המופת ההנדסיות הגדולות ביותר בעולם. הגדולים ביותר, שלישי ב9. 1943. מלחמת העולם השנייה עדיין לא הוכרעה. שיירות של בעלות הברית חייבות לשרוד כדי להעביר אספקה בפלישה הגדולה, ה-D-Day.
It would be impossible to avoid German U-boats. They would be everywhere.
שיירות על המים, מכת מוות, רביעי ב9.
Of the original redwood forest has been cut down.
The redwoods are the most gorgeous, beautiful, gigantic, amazing living creature on the planet, you know, and everybody wants to see one, and everybody wants to touch one, you know, and when you talk to a lot of people, they literally can't believe that you're allowed to cut a redwood tree. And yet, in the northern part of this state, cutting down a redwood tree is just matter of course.
From the southernmost redwood tree known to exist today to the northernmost, the 1,600-kilometer journey will allow Fay and his colleague Lindsay Holm to collect data on the ecology, history, and current state of the redwood forest, calling attention to the forest's majesty and fragility along the way.
Lindsay records all of the plant species as we travel, and she very much more specifically writes diameters of redwood trees and records their status as kind of old growth or secondary growth. Then I record also birds and any sign of large mammals that we see, including actual human beings. Step by step, we record all that information, and when we're done, we'll probably have a better global view of what's going on in the redwood forest than any other two people on Earth.
Some of the very trees Fay is studying have stood for more than 2,000 years, ranking them among the oldest living things on the planet. Rising more than 100 meters into the sky, they are also the tallest and among the most endangered.
We've gone from 100% old growth redwoods to 3%. And that's about the rate that every single forest is going on Earth.
The causes may be somewhat different from forest to forest, but last year, deforestation continued to be a huge problem across our planet. In Borneo, some 26,000 square kilometers of rainforest have been cut down and replanted with oil palm trees, mostly for production of biodiesel fuel. In Brazil, more than 20,000 square kilometers of rainforest on average each year have given way to soybean and cattle farming. And in the Democratic Republic of Congo, poor farmers slash and burn about 9,000 square kilometers of forest each year, mostly for heating and cooking fuel. Worldwide, nearly 50% of the original forests are gone, and with the help of NASA satellite photos taken over the last 5 years, we can see there are few signs of slowing. Today, an area the size of a soccer field is cut down every other second.
So you lose those forests. You have a lot more erosion. You have a lot more degradation on water systems. It's a huge problem, and it exists in every single country on Earth, developed or not developed.
Adding fuel to the fire, the cutting and burning of all those trees emits hundreds of millions of tons of carbon into the atmosphere every year, accounting for 25% of the world's CO2 emissions. And since trees absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, what we lose in forests, we gain in additional carbon.
There are some parts of the world where land is being cleared at an enormously rapid rate. This is an essential issue for us to track, a critical element of environmental success, and frankly, a critical element of whether the planet is going to get onto a sustainable trajectory.
To that end, the Environmental Performance Index tells us where trees are falling unsustainably, with Uganda, Pakistan, Nigeria, and Indonesia being among the worst offenders.
To see the degree of deforestation that's continuing in Southeast Asia, Indonesia in particular, is really deteriorating rapidly.
On the flip side, Germany, Cuba, Ukraine, Spain, and Italy have all grown or maintained their forests at sustainable levels.
So in terms of specific performance, country by country, there's good news to report to some degree. Some of the bad actors of the past, Brazil, for example, have done a lot to clean up their act.
Deforestation in Brazil dropped 30% from the previous year, the lowest rate on record. That's welcome news in a region where the fires used to clear these forests are the #1 source of air pollution. As for California's redwoods,
we had no idea that we're going to find trees, many trees over 10 feet in diameter. And I think that's why we're in the redwoods. We want to use the redwoods to say, we can do this.
deforestation, together with climate change and overuse, is at the heart of another major land degradation problem: desertification. In June, the UN warned it could cause an environmental crisis of global proportions.
That's the end game, you know, desertification, when there's nothing but silicon left. You know, that's what you've got. No water, no soil, no atmosphere, just silicon, you know, and that's desertification.
Already in Central Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa, millions of people are being forced to move. The UN report says that could jump to 60 million within the next 12 years if desertification goes unchecked. In Sudan, where conflicts have forced millions of people into desert camps, increased population is taxing water resources and stressing the land by overplanting and grazing.
If you look at where you could have a cow, you know, 20 years ago, you can't have a cow there now. You have to have a camel there, you know.
As a result, topsoil there is eroding and blowing away, converting much of the region into Sahara. In northern China, sand from the Gobi Desert has been migrating at a rate of 2,400 square kilometers a year, overtaking everything in its path. Whole towns have disappeared, and sandstorms frequently pass through Beijing. Dust from China has even crossed the Pacific Ocean and reached the United States. The encroaching sands of the Gobi Desert are such a threat in China that the government has invested $8 billion into the largest reforestation project in the world, the Green Wall of China, a buffer of poplar trees and grasses that will stretch some 2,800 miles from Inner Mongolia to Beijing. Though many have criticized the campaign as an expensive boondoggle, China says it's already rolled back some 8,000 square kilometers of desert and believes it will eventually reverse desertification. The Environmental Performance Index looks at a variety of land use issues, including desertification.
Our measure of ecoregion protection looks at the different kinds of ecosystems that a country has, because it turns out that you want to have different things happening on the prairies versus the mountains versus the grasslands versus the forests.
For protecting their country's ecosystems, Luxembourg, Greenland, and Belize earned relatively high marks, while North Korea, Turkey, and Haiti help round out the bottom of the list. While these wild spaces keep our world habitable, providing everything from the water we drink to the air we breathe, they mean even more to the creatures that live in them. We share this planet with some 2 million different species, and those are just the ones we know about. Scientists believe some 90% more are yet to be discovered, and last year, more than 800 new species were added to the list. In Suriname and Colombia, biologists discovered 24 new wildlife species in the rainforests. Among them, brightly colored frogs, several types of dung beetles, and a new type of forest ant. In Vietnam, a snake, 2 butterflies, and 5 varieties of orchid. In Congo, a bat, 2 shrews, and 2 frogs. In Brazil, anthropologists even discovered a lost tribe of humans.
For people to hear that there are new species being discovered and that there are these wild places that exist, it just computes as good.
Fay himself helped bring to light another major wildlife discovery last year: a migration of antelope in southern Sudan, which in sheer numbers of animals rivals the more famous animal migrations of the Serengeti.
Well over 1 million antelope, 1.3, 1.4 million antelope in southern Sudan, where people think there's nothing left, you know?
Last year, we also witnessed a fair share of success stories in wildlife protection. After 35 years of recovery, the poster child of the U.S. Endangered Species Act, the American bald eagle, was taken off the list. Thousands of eagle pairs now populate a region covering most of the eastern U.S., northern California, Alaska, and much of Canada. And so long as their habitat remains protected, they're healthy enough to survive on their own. Last year also brought good news for another majestic creature, the blue whale, the largest animal ever to live on this planet. Blue whales' numbers dwindled only to a few hundred in the southern hemisphere. Now, scientists have discovered more than 2,000. The news is encouraging, but with only an estimated 4,500 blue whales left in the world's oceans, they are still endangered. And unfortunately, there were also a number of species last year that joined its ranks. The Indian gharial, the western lowland gorilla, and China's Yangtze River dolphin were all deemed critically endangered. The dolphin may have even gone completely extinct.
In my time, on our watch, we have seen the loss of that amazing creature. These are big, charismatic animals. What else is being lost?
In the lush mountains of Central Africa, in Congo's Virunga National Park, another iconic species teeters on the brink of extinction, the mountain gorilla. Only about 700 of these gentle giants are left in the wild, thanks to habitat destruction and poaching. And last year, 4 of them were found brutally killed in what's believed to be a warning by local rebels looking to profit off the wood in the gorilla's protected habitat.
The savagery that exists in situations like that is unthinkable. It is a way for them to send a message saying, you know, we're going to kill anything in our path, and so you better leave.
The pictures couldn't be more disturbing, depicting fatal gunshot wounds to a full-term pregnant female and a large male silverback, and a live baby gorilla clutching its dead mother. It was the largest single killing of gorillas in the past 25 years. And according to the Wildlife Conservation Society, if the forest isn't secured quickly, we could lose the entire population.
And to lose the mountain gorilla is a catastrophic thing for the planet, and we shouldn't let it happen. And if we decide not to let it happen, it won't happen.
When it comes to protecting wildlife and habitats, once again, the Environmental Performance Index reveals that some countries stand out as models for the rest. Sri Lanka, Portugal, and Kenya are all creature-friendly, taking action to track and preserve threatened species, as well as protecting their habitats. On the other hand, Italy, Pakistan, and Guatemala score low on the rankings, risking the health and long-term survival of the species that live there. Not all wildlife issues this past year were so well understood, or so easily linked to humans. All over the United States, as well as parts of Canada, South America, Europe, and Asia, farmers and scientists encountered an epic mystery. Billions of seemingly healthy honeybees fled their queen, their offspring, and their food stores, and vanished. Honeybees pollinate a third of all American crops, everything from apples and broccoli to almonds, valuing them at billions of dollars annually. Not to mention the $150 million their honey brings in.
We know that about 1 in 3 bites of food we eat are directly or indirectly the result of honeybees.
No surprise, the disappearance sent the agricultural industry into a panic and launched labs across the country in search of a cause. As with any good mystery, there was no shortage of suspects. Everything from Osama bin Laden to Armageddon.
We don't think it's the Rapture. We don't think it's cell phones. We don't think it's a terrorist threat.
Dennis Van Engelsdorp, acting apiarist for the state of Pennsylvania, was among the first to seriously study the die-off, tracking down diseased colonies around the U.S. and isolating bees as their hives were collapsing.
Somehow we think it's quite possible that the bees know they're sick or are aware that something's wrong. And so they fly away from the hive, trying to avoid infecting their sisters.
Van Engelsdorp and his colleagues dissected thousands of quarantine bees, trying to determine what separated healthy from sick.
We didn't know, and of course we first assumed it was mites or some of these traditional problems with bees.
They cut open their abdomens and thoraxes, expecting to find parasites. Instead, they found kidneys and intestines turned black by what seemed to be a nasty infection.
It is very clear in some cases that it can't be good, what we're seeing in these bees. I mean, really heavy black tissue, as if the bee is rotting from the inside. But we couldn't find anything that could explain it.
An hour down the road at Penn State University, a possible answer arose. By grinding up infected bees and extracting their RNA, biologists here could identify every pathogen living inside them. And after months of searching, they found one virus stood out: the Israeli acute paralysis virus. First discovered in Israel in 2004, the virus is found in honeybees around the world, in colonies that haven't collapsed. But together with additional pathogens, chemical pesticides, and nutritional stresses in the U.S., scientists believe it may have pushed the compromised bees over the edge. Now, they are bracing themselves for next year.
Do I think that there's going to be a crisis in food production next year if we see this again? No. But we really have to get a handle of this if we're expecting to keep doing business as normal.
70% משטח כדור הארץ מכוסים במימיו של האוקיינוס. נסו לדמיין כיצד היה נראה כדור הארץ בלעדיו. לייבש את האוקיינוס. התוכנית הבאה. נסו לדמיין נסיעה ברכבת הרים בפעם הראשונה בחיים. ערוץ נשיונל ג'אוגרפיק הופך את המחקר על ראשו. כש5 גברים עוזבים את מולדתם באיי ונואטו כדי לגלות את אמריקה. שם הם משחקים גולף, רואים שלג ואפילו מנסים את מזלם בבורסה. פגוש את הילידים. אמריקה. הערב ב9.
The Earth is alive.
We want to know what's on our planet.
It's a living organism.
We can't help but be fascinated by it.
עוין, שביר, מלא עוצמה, כדור הארץ. ניסיון לפענח כמה מהתופעות המדעיות הגדולות של כל הזמנים, חקר סוד החיים, וחשיפת תיאוריות מדהימות חדשות לגבי היקום. חקר כדור הארץ, ראשון ב-11. זה התחיל כמשימה של האו"ם, שמירה על השקט, אבל הפך במהרה לצד מכשפות.
The rebels are going on the rampage. They're out on the warpath.
בלי נשק, בלי אספקה ובסכנת חיים.
He's going to eat you if he gets you.
האם יישארו להילחם או יעשו ניסיון נואש לזכות בחופש?
I was going to have to silence an innocent kid in order to escape.
כלואים בארץ זרה, ילדים חיילים, שני ב9. ההיסטוריה שופעת רעיונות גדולים, חלוצים, חולמים. הסקרנים, בשבילם הבלתי אפשרי הוא פשוט אתגר. ההיסטוריה מלאה באנשים שסרבו לעמוד במקום והפכו רעיונות גדולים לעצומים. ערוץ נשיונל ג'אוגרפיק מתחכה אחר האבולוציה של כמה מיצירות המופת ההנדסיות הגדולות ביותר בעולם. הגדולים ביותר, שלישי ב9. ערוץ נשיונל ג'אוגרפיק לוקח אתכם למסע דרך התוכניות הטובות ביותר של 2009.
We didn't realize that we were only at the beginning.
All of our ideas on how planets were formed were wrong.
התוכניות הידיעות הטובות ביותר של 2009, 1 בינואר.
If there's one thing we learned last year, it's that business as normal is changing in just about every facet of the environment. As a result, all over the planet, we find countless examples of citizens and governments taking issues to heart and changing their ways. In September, the Vatican made history, becoming the world's first carbon-neutral state. By restoring an ancient forest on a 37-acre tract of land in central Hungary, a startup eco-restoration firm will offset the Vatican's yearly carbon footprint, be it from cars or the heating and lighting of buildings. Even without a papal decree, governments around the world have taken similar steps to capture carbon, as have big business, celebrities, and politicians.
It's not a total solution. It's in some ways a coping strategy for the intermediate term, but it does help for people to commit to being carbon neutral.
For the record, to offset the emissions generated in the making of Earth Report, State of the Planet, we've invested in alternative energy sources to go carbon neutral. And on a larger scale, so did nations and cities across the globe. In New York, yellow cabs will go green by 2012, with hybrid cars that will prevent some 200,000 tons of CO2 a year from entering the air. In September, China announced it's going to spend $265 billion on fossil fuel alternatives, helping it boost its total percentage of renewable energy use from 7.5% in 2005 to 15% in 2020. In the United States, the government pledged nearly $200 million to test storing CO2 emissions deep underground through a technology called carbon sequestration. If they can make it work, the Energy Department says more than 3 trillion tons of carbon dioxide can be stored beneath North America, enough to trap U.S. emissions for more than 1,000 years. Half a world away, Australia is phasing out all incandescent light bulbs by 2010, saving 4 million tons of carbon from entering the atmosphere by 2012. If every country followed Australia's lead, we can cut tens of millions more. Quantifying this worldwide push for clean, renewable, and resourceful uses of energy, the EPI gives us yet another ranking. Iceland, Norway, and Paraguay are among the most efficient users of energy.
Countries that are really pushing on this are finding their picture improving. We see Denmark having improved a great deal. Why? Because they've really invested heavily in wind power. Similarly, Germany has made real progress. There is no country in the world that has more installed solar power than Germany. And that's pretty impressive for a country where it rains an awful lot of the year.
All this eco-progress wasn't confined to bureaucrats. Last year, going green went mainstream. In July, an estimated 8 million people from 130 countries in all 7 continents watched Live Earth, the concert for a climate in crisis, drawing worldwide attention to the issues of global warming. From the Academy Awards to the Nobel Prize, last year, climate change took center stage, with Al Gore taking home an Oscar for An Inconvenient Truth. And along with the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the Nobel Peace Prize.
It shows, I think, some shifting in terms of the moral compass, if you like. And so you're preventing future wars if you cut back emissions, and that's something which both the IPCC and Al Gore can take a lot of credit for.
Tallying up the many positive and negative contributions made to the environment last year, we come finally to our own award on Earth Report, State of the Planet. Judging from many of the criteria we've discussed during the course of our show, greenhouse gas emissions, overfishing, deforestation, and ecosystem protections. The Environmental Performance Index reveals Iran, Cuba, and Turkey to be among the world's worst, with Oman ranking dead last. On the plus side, Panama, Kenya, and Iceland are the most eco-friendly, with Namibia taking the #1 spot. No matter where countries fall on the list, though, all of our scientists agree these rankings are far from etched in stone.
This is a tough challenge. The short term can be very discouraging looking, but it's by no means a lost cause. Just a little bit of a changed policy can produce huge dividends.
With technological know-how, economic commitment, and dedication to change, even the world's worst ecological offenders can transform the world for the better.
If there was no hope, then you just say, okay, well, we're done, you know. But this planet is still in good enough condition that we can dig ourselves out of the crisis. I believe we can.
The next few years will determine, in a way that will have more impact than the next 1,000 years, the future of the ocean, the future of wildlife on the land, and certainly the future of humankind.
And to make sure we're headed in the right direction, we will continue to take our planet's pulse.
Earth, a 4.5 billion-year-old planet, still evolving. As continents shift and clash, volcanoes erupt, glaciers grow and recede. The Earth's crust is carved in countless fascinating ways, leaving a trail of geological mysteries behind. This is the story of Hawaii, a mountain chain over 80 million years old and home to the most active volcano in the world. In this exquisite volatile landscape, scientists hunt for clues to the island's origins. Clues that may shed new light on the formation of the Earth itself. Hawaii, the most isolated group of islands on Earth, stretching 1,500 miles across the middle of the Pacific Ocean. These 8 tropical islands are one of the youngest geological formations on the planet. With stunning beaches, huge canyons, and the biggest volcanoes on Earth. This is where paradise meets hell. The investigation into how Hawaii was formed began in 1934. Dutch geophysicist Felix Menes invented the gravimeter, an incredible machine which enabled scientists to accurately measure gravity for the first time. With his cutting-edge technology, Menes was able to calculate the gravitational forces at work on the Big Island, and using this data, determine its size. His results revealed that the Big Island was like a gigantic iceberg, only its tip was visible above the ocean. But drain away the water and its true size is remarkable. The island is twice the height of Everest and so massive that Everest could fit inside it 140 times. Geologist Mike Pollan heads to the top of the mountain Mauna Kea, the highest point on the Big Island, to get a sense of its true enormity.
We're standing at the top of Mauna Kea volcano, which is the tallest mountain in the world. It's 13,796 feet above sea level, but it goes all the way down to the ocean floor. It ends up being about 56,000 feet high.
This giant island is the largest in the United States and bigger than all the other Hawaiian islands put together. Intrigued, scientists set out to discover what could have created such a huge landmass. 10,000 feet below the peak of Mauna Kea and 70 miles to the south, the prime suspect is plain to see. The awesome Kilauea volcano.
We like to call Kilauea the most active volcano in the world because it's been erupting continuously since 1983. It has been going every day, almost non-stop since that time. Since early 2008, it's been even more active because now we have